gentlemen, I would like to welcome you once again to Poets of the East. And we have a marvelous, amazing poet, Mr. Clive Oseman. Clive is just a man with such a great sense of humor, and who is, I would say, more than a friend of the absurd, much like myself, a fellow who likes to look at life with a bit of a perpendicular view to the way things are normally done. Clive, my friend, welcome so much. I'm so glad you could join me here at Poets of the East.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, I've had a chance to hear your work for several years. I've heard some of your pieces that are, shall we say, fake reviews. I've heard your marvelous tweaking of royalty. I've heard your misplaced letters. You have so many different riffs. One of the first questions I like to ask my writer friends is, when did you first start writing, and then when did you fancy yourself as a person that really has no choice but to be a writer?
Well, that's really quite a story because I came to it very late, and I started really writing poetry in sort of 2003, 2004, when I was having a very, like so many people who write poetry, novices. I was having a very difficult time at that time, in personal life, and I was writing poetry as you do, which wasn't very good, but it served a purpose. And then I sort of got involved in, for a while, writing haiku and tanka, and I was published pretty widely all around the world doing that. But I lost interest in it, and I started going to open mics I met Nick Lovell by chance, a friend, an online friend of mine who I'd never actually met. I mean, this is quite a story because he wasn't a poet. Kevin Duncan, his name was. He's unfortunately no longer with us. But I knew him online, and he lived in Worcester. Nick, who I didn't know at that time, went to the Worcester Poetry Slam, and Kevin, who wasn't a poet, but he went to the slam just to see what it was all about because he was a bit bored and he thought it might be something different. And he met Nick, and they got talking, and he said, when Nick said he was living in Swindon, Kevin said, "Oh, I know a poet that lives in Swindon. Do you know him?" And he introduced us. And I started going to open mics with Nick, and I was doing all serious stuff, and it was okay, I quite enjoyed it, but I wouldn't have got anywhere. It wasn't my scene, it was all very serious and, very, what you might call page poetry stuff, which I'm not particularly, I like it, I like reading it, and, I enjoy reading good poetry, but I'm not that good at it. And then one night we went to an event called Hammer and Tongue in Bristol. Now that was a slam, which I'd never even heard of a poetry slam at that time, with a headliner as well. And the slam was awesome. It was really, really good. But the headliner, Luke Wright, basically, and I say this quite often, and I've said it to Luke himself, that night changed my life. Because his stage presence was absolutely amazing, and he was hilarious. And I sat there thinking, this is it. This is what I want to do. Forget the serious stuff that I'm not very good at. I know I've got a sense of humour, although I was very, very shy and introvert, and it took me a long time to sort of bring it out properly. But it was that night that made me realise that poetry could be more than what I thought it was. And I saw performance poetry, I saw slam poetry, and I was absolutely hooked.
Well, nice, nice. So let me ask you this: when you started doing your writing, starting to take writing seriously as an outlet, whether we're talking performance or not, just writing, were there authors who made an impression on you? Were authors that struck you as either effective or inspiring, or people that you want to emulate early in your writing career?
Not really, not early on, because I have to admit I'm not very well read. I'm not educated, and it was really started writing, as I say, in difficult times, as people do. I had no idea what good poetry was or anything like that. I barely went to school after the age of about 12, so my education didn't introduce me to poetry as such. But then, as I say, I discovered haiku and Japanese forms, and I sort of joined a few groups online, and I met virtually. I met some excellent poets of that sort of genre, particularly people like David Taylink in Australia and Claire Everett, who comes from, she's British, and quite a few others. But it came as quite a shock to me when I started not mixing, but conversing with real poets who did haiku and tango, because they were nothing like what I've been led to believe they were. Western textbooks are like, haiku are 575 syllables, and basically that's it. That's all you learn. It's certainly in this country. And I thought anything that was 575 was a haiku. And I went to a bookshop, which was not far from my house. It's closed down now, unfortunately, and I picked up. I thought, I've been writing haiku. This was before I met the people online. I've been writing haiku, and I went to this shop and I picked up a book of Japanese haiku, obviously translated. And I didn't get it. I was like, this is, it's not 575. It doesn't mean anything. And I sort of dismissed it as rubbish, to start with. And then, being the type of person I am, I thought, well, it can't be rubbish. There's people who are being published and everything else. So I did more research, and I Googled and learnt as much as I could, and that's how I first got involved. And then I sort of started to get bored with it, and as I said earlier, I started to get bored with it, and I started writing longer poetry and going out to open mics, and then I started to meet people who really did influence me. To start off with Nick Lovell, who's been a great friend, and he sort of taught me the ropes. And as I was going on, there were two people in particular who I could trust to tell me if something was not good enough or whatever, or sometimes inappropriate, because because I've been so sheltered when I was younger, I sort of my sense of humour could sometimes be a bit inappropriate, and I've learnt a lot. And the two people that really helped me through that were Nick and Chloe Jacquet, who is an absolutely fantastic poet and performer from Gloucestershire, which is not far from where I live. Someone I met at open mics, and she's just an awesome poet and awesome person as well. And as I went along, I met people, particularly on the Bristol scene at that time, because Bristol's not far from Swindon. It was the nearest open mic really that I could go to for performance poetry, and people like Danny Pandolfi and Solomon O.B. and other people, but those in particular were brilliant. And another poet that I met around that time, who's been a huge influence on me, is Robert Garnham, who is, although he does write serious stuff, he's best known for his comedy stuff, and it's been very influential on me because he's got a very similar type of sense of humour, and he made me see that you could say these things and people would laugh. Yeah. Because sometimes I have them, as you know, I mean, you see me perform, I have the most absurd thoughts sometimes, and I wouldn't have dreamt of actually saying these things in public, a few years ago, because I thought people, I did that one-man show, What If They Laugh at Me, and that was based on that, the fact that I had got a sense of humour, and I knew that I could think of funny things, but I was scared that people would actually laugh at me rather than with me. you know. So, but yeah, and obviously since then I've met so many amazing poets who have become great friends, and you know, too many to name really, but you know, I'm always sort of wary of naming people who are great poets because I know so many of them, and you know, you leave people out, and although they never say anything, you think after, oh, I should have named them, and then I wonder if they'll be offended, you know. But yeah, they were the biggest influences on me as I sort of got on the spoken word scene. Certainly Nick and Chloe Jacquet, who were enormously, and still are enormously helpful to me.
Let me ask you this question. It's another one of those that I like to ask everyone. Now, I know that some poets work at it. You know, they every day try to write something down, or every week they want to put something down. And other poets feel that they should wait for inspiration. That forcing it doesn't make sense, or forcing it is abusing the process. Where do you fall in that spectrum? Are you I want to write every day or as often as possible, or are you more the I wait for inspiration sort of poet?
Yeah, virtually all of my stuff comes to me sort of uninvited, and I jot it down, and then quite often I'll wake up in the morning, if I ever sleep, that is, but quite often in the morning an idea will come to me, perhaps a line or a concept, and I'll write a line, and then straight away the whole thing comes out, and obviously afterwards I sort of walk away from it for a bit, then go back to it, and I might find one or two things, oh no, that won't work. But generally, so many of my poems are written sort of instantly. And obviously the ones that involve a lot of wordplay, like the letter swapping poems, the process with that is I think of maybe a couple of words that would sound funny if the letters were transposed. And then I spend a few days thinking more words that would sound funny, and then once I've built up a list of about 20 words or phrases, then I put them together in a sort of narrative. And but no, writing to order is not for me. I mean, sometimes people, you go to groups or whatever, and you write to prompts, and I do it, but it's sometimes I come up with something that remains in my sets. And I mean, I also, as you know, I write flash fiction as well, and I find Ashley Edge's flash fiction fun very useful, because I was very new to flash fiction when I first went to that, and they sort of give you words that you have to use, and you have to have specific word counts, and you have 15 minutes to do it. And not only was it interesting and enjoyable, but I have come up with some things that I've kept. I mean, I've come up with some rubbish as well.
Sure, of course.
But yeah, but as a rule, no, I don't write at any specific time or to any schedule. I just write when it comes. I've got a saying, and I really mean it, because it's, I mean, I often say to Amy, Amy, and I often say to her that I'm pregnant with a poem. I know there's something there. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the subject matter is, but I know in the back of my mind there's something trying to come out. And then I'll wake up, or I'll be in the shower or whatever, and it'll just suddenly come. And that is the way I write.
Okay. One of the next questions I typically like to ask is, are there themes or topics that you find yourself addressing on a regular basis?
Not really. I can be quite political, as you know, although I have sort of veered away from that a little bit now, but I'm very left wing, and a lot of my earlier stuff was political, even if it was humorous, it was satirical, and but these days I'm finding that a lot of my ideas involve animals. Obviously animals doing things that animals can't do. But this is where the Robert Garnham influence comes in, because he's written poems about badgers in his garden, and all sorts of creatures, and that's when I realised that actually this works. Because Robert is as funny as anybody you'll ever here. He's one of those people that is he can say something that if anybody else said it, it wouldn't be funny. But because it's Robert, everybody will find it hilarious. And as I say, he's influenced a lot of my stuff.
All right, let me ask you this one. Uh, there are some poets who, don't address politics, don't address social issues. They're much more introspective, and others of us, like yourself and myself, we tend to often address social issues. Do you feel that there is a responsibility in the writing community, in the poet community, to address social things?
I think I think every individual's different, obviously, and some people are just not that way inclined. But I think it's a very important thing, and those who are politically minded and socially aware, obviously, it is a very important thing. But I think everybody's got their own interests and writing styles, and it's not for everybody.
Okay. Now, my last question. Well, last question typically is if a young person came to you and said, "You need to get that."
No, I'm just going to put it on silent because it will happen again.
Okay. Uh, if a young person came to you and said, I've been writing poetry from time to time, but, I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it's vital. I don't know if it's important. Is it a waste of time to write poetry? What would you say to a young person? Is poetry a waste of time? Is it
Absolutely not.
important or
No.
not?
I mean, poetry and spoken word in general has an enormous potential to change people's lives. It certainly changed mine. And yes, certainly a lot of the stuff I wrote early on, you will consider to be very poor writing, but it served its purpose. And the only way you can progress as a writer is by reading plenty and performing and learning as you go along. As I say, I write comedy stuff, and a lot of the stuff I did early on was problematic. Because I was one of those people that if there's humour everywhere. Everything has got a funny side, and sometimes I upset people. And I've learned from that that's not the idea. I want to make people laugh, not upset them. And I think it's the same with any form of poetry. You learn as you go along. So if you're writing, it doesn't matter if it's if it's good or if it's not. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's subjective anyway. And if you go to an open mic night and you read your poetry, you're making friends. You're listening to other people, and that's the way to improve. So definitely no, it's never a waste of time.
Okay. Now comes the favorite part. Now we get to hear some of Clive's writing. So I want to encourage you. A lot of times when we're doing these the poetry roundtable, we get 3 minutes, we get 4 minutes. There's not a chance to really stretch out. So I want to say to you, if you've got some longer pieces, feel free to dig in and read a nice long one if you'd like. Don't feel compressed or constrained. Brother, anything you'd like to read for us will be well received. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I've done what I typically do for when I've got a headline or a feature, and I've prepared a set of a certain length. And there's some short stuff, some much longer stuff. It's all humorous, and a lot of it is from my book, which was published on July the 2nd. And typically, with me, it involves animals, musical hamsters, and much bigger issues. And the what that title means will become clear because it's based on two poems which I'm going to read in a few minutes. So I'm going to start by doing what I always find useful, because obviously there's going to be people here who don't know me, when people listening to this who don't know me. So I'm going to start by reading a poem of my life story, which is obviously 100% true, no fiction whatsoever. It all really happened. And I gave it the rather original title of My Life Story. Clive Oseman was born in Birmingham quite a long time ago, and emerged from the womb singing Blinded by the Light, which was later plagiarised by Manfred Mann. Such was his generosity, he donated the proceeds of the subsequent court case to a charity funding music tuition for underprivileged goats. By the age of 2, he could fart Beethoven's entire oeuvre on one tin of beans, but tended to follow through if trying it with Wagner. At the age of 3, he composed a symphony for spoons and triangle, and on his 4th birthday performed his first concerto for violin, simultaneously acting as the soloist and the orchestra. 6 months later, he sent the lyrics of Bohemian Rhapsody to a young Farouk Bulsara, advising him to change his name, and released the song in the mid-70s, when most chart music was shit, for maximum impact. Oseman's impact in music started to wane when at the age of 6 he had a premonition of Morrissey. And although he wrote a couple of operas and some of the Beatles songs, he finally turned his back on it when he saw a vision of Simon Cowell. At 8, he beat Bobby Fischer at chess, having learnt the game by watching his uncle play. He promised to keep quiet about this if the anti-Semitic piece of shit disappeared into the sunset. That's Fischer, not his uncle. He had his uncle assassinated. You are the first to learn the truth about Fischer's retirement, and you have no proof about the uncle thing. He gave up chess to become a lazy bastard, and lived off the royalties from Bohemian Rhapsody, until he returned heavily disguised as all 4 Spice Girls in an attempt to destroy music forever. His only known oil painting, Giraffe on an Acid Trip, sold for $300 million. But despite moving close to Bristol, he isn't Banksy, though he does urinate very artistically up walls when pissed. In recent years he has regretted wasting his talents, and has become active in spoken word, for which he thankfully has no talent to waste. His autobiography, From Infinity and Beyond to a Damp Flat in Swindon, the story of wasted genius, is now on sale in Poundland and at all shit jumble sales. So that's the first one. That's all actually totally true, obviously. So now you know a bit more about me. So now I'm going to read 2 poems from the book, which give the book its title. I mean, I know it's a very common title for a collection of poetry and prose. Musical hamsters and much bigger issues. I mean, if you go on Amazon or Google, you'll find loads and loads of books with that title. So I need to explain what my inspiration was for that. And there's 2, it's based on 2 poems, and the first is called Never Buy a Cheap Hamster. Sometimes my poems are a bit surreal. This one is more serious, I feel. You see, if there's one thing really pisses me off, it's my hamster trying to play Rachmaninoff. It would probably get away with Liszt, but when he tries to play Sergei, he just sounds pissed. The notes are just all over the place, like my poems. It's a fucking disgrace. I paid a £5 for that useless beast. You'd think he could play Chopin at least. I think those who went to the conservatoire cost 150 quid or more. And I know that was a dodgy rhyme. But whose poem is it, yours or mine? I think he got some kind of bursary to learn to sing like Freddie Mercury. But that's no good to a fan of piano who likes a bloody good concerto with the gerbils as the orchestra. All bloody night he sings I Want to Break Free because he can't remember Bohemian Rhapsody. I wish he would break free is what I'm saying. His singing is worse than his piano playing. So the message is clear. Unless you're demented, concert level hamsters are pretty expensive. And don't get me started on the dog. He's a cute little fellow, but do you think he can play Dvorak on cello? A music fan once told me the Animals were good. I'd ram my piano up their arse if I could. All the money I've wasted, depleting my wealth, I could have had the bloody lessons myself. And I may have exaggerated about the gerbils. And yeah, the first time I ever performed that poem publicly, right at the end when I say I may have exaggerated about the gerbils, I don't know, I mean I do read, I don't perform from memory because I've got a terrible memory. And I read it, I immediately felt embarrassed, but everybody laughed. I read it as I may have exaggerated about gerbils. So yeah, but no, it was definitely the gerbils. And the next one is the bigger issues. And some people seek answers to big issues like the meaning of life or what happens to us when we die. To them, my issues are small fry, insignificant in the scheme of things, and I have to confess that stings, because I may not be intellectual, my grey cells are somewhat ineffectual when deep thought is deemed essential, but to me, the small things matter more. Like, what are wasps actually for? They get mildly angry and it's all out war. You try to repel them and they sting you to fuck. Then they do it one more time for luck. They show no compassion, not one little bit, the barbarous, pointless, stripy things. When I want to appear clever, I step it up a level and I ask questions like, why is a fear of long words known as hippopotamonstrosis quipedaliophobia? What sort of sadistic bastard thought hippopotamonstrosis quipedaliophobia was a suitable word for a fear of long words? I mean, for fuck's sake. And it really is for those who doubt it. If music be the food of love, are cheese quavers an aphrodisiac? Is there such a thing as cheese semi-quavers to give a quick thrill? If so, toss one my way if you will, because on the subject of food, does a fruit fly count as one of your 5 a day? I have my doubts, but if it does I can ditch the sprouts, because they're not veggies. It's a well-known fact they are Beelzebub's scrotal sack. It's not just food that fascinates me. Other things I need to know include, is a really hard Englishman in Australia called a pomegranate? If I wrote a book on the history of censorship, would they try to ban it? Is David Icke for real, goddammit? If a murder of crows didn't mean to get together, are they a manslaughter? Do water polo players ride seahorses? Are you lot bored stiff or is it rigor mortis? If you buy a wok on the internet, is it an Ewok? When it arrives, are you in for a shock? And here's the thing, will the first non-binary monarch be called Their Majesty the Queen? And when they assess the age of a dinosaur fossil, is it even remotely possible to know if it used anti-aging creams? Because calculations will go all to hell if they use those products by L'Oreal. But the question that concerns me most may come as a surprise. If you stick your head down the toilet, which is not very wise, do you get floaters in your eyes? And that last line always gets a groan. I love it. I'll just take a quick swig of my drink.
Very good, sir. Very good.
Thank you. Right, the next one.
Your humor, sir. Always.
Sorry? Say again,
Always
sorry?
enjoy your humor.
Thank you. Right, the next one is one of my first. It's not one of my first, but it's one of my, shall we say, misheard typo type things. If you've ever watched a live TV show with the subtitles on, or if you've been on Zoom with the captions on, you'll know that sometimes what comes up on the subtitles or the captions is not what was said. And I discovered this watching the news with subtitles on and laughing out loud at something I really shouldn't have been laughing at, because what had come up on the screen was hilarious. I can't remember what it was now, but I know that it really made me laugh out loud. And this is based on that. And it's called When Subtitties Go Bong. My name is Sky Snowman. I am a poet, chameleon and Tory seller from the wet piglands, po-faced in Klingon in Wiltshire. Recently I've buffered from Blighter's cock, so I forced myself to write something, anything, to release myself from this torture for the good of my genital health. After all, it has been suggestive that fighting is as good as therapy. This is the result. It's not likely to be one of my greatest tits, not by a long fork, but at least I'm getting worms down on paper, which is half the bottle. It's not a poem, but a brief naughty biography. I started writing poetry about 20 years ago, but didn't start reforming until 2014, when I started breeding at open mics. Breeding in public was awkward, for a sly introvert as I was back then, but now I'm keen to breed anywhere I can. In the curly years I rarely lasted 3 minutes, but now I barely get warmed up inside 20 minutes. Indeed, I've done a one-man performance lasting 75 minutes on numerous occasions, and that takes guts. I called that show What If They Barf At Me, and many people did. I also write fast fiction and snort Tories, which is a weird thing to do. I am the co-ghost of a broken Nergnite, along with Licked Shovel. I am not what you would call an additional poet, nor am I a glammed-up chameleon. I don't blunder lonely as a clown or write about Stafford Hills, and I don't tell typical jokes or reel off bemusing one lioness. I guess I'm stuck in the fiddle, Nietzsche one wing or the other. But I have found my own voice, and that is the most impotent thing. I want to bend this chalk, string it to its confusion, by suggesting that we all have something to slay. Even if you think it doesn't need to be dead, slay it anyway. As I Tennyson earlier, it's God for your gentle well-being. Thank you for listening. So, on the same sort of lines, this next one came about via a typo. I was sending a message on Messenger, and because I've got fat thumbs and the keys are quite small, I actually, instead of good morning, I actually typed goose morbing. And I was going to change it, but then I realised the person I was actually sending the message to would probably think I'd done it deliberately, because it's the sort of thing I do. And that's based on this. Today, I wanted to talk about how essay it is to umbrella stand someone who is stalking nonsense. However, I've been informed by the flowers that be that I must talk about polishits and abhorrent affairs. This puts me in a difficult titillation, as I am averse to anyone telling me what to do and cramping my piles. So hopefully I can concubine the two, and no one will be any the miser. There are so many polishitans I think should be in prison, like Jeremy Thingy. I don't use the C worm, but I'm skewy, you know who I mean. But I'm going to start by plugging my new book, The Life and Crimes of Maurice Bronson. Now there's a Thingy, if ever I swore one. And he skirtingly had plenty of abhorrent affairs. There are rumours that he has feathered chilblains on every continent on peanut earth. Another gory polyshiton who deserves a damn good chicken is Jacob Grease Snob, once brilliantly described as a haunted Victorian penis. Punk thump it. I don't normally advocate violence, but we all have our limits. Anyway, I dope I have stalked about abhorrent affairs enough to pacify the demands. As posts on Basefuck would say, if you understood this stalk, you are a penis. Thanks for lending me your shears. As the Beatles once said, lend me your shears and I'll sling you a thong. Now fluff off. Thank you.
Very good, sir. Very good.
Thank you. And I like the fact that people can actually understand what I'm saying, even though I'm talking nonsense. And that was the whole idea of it, and it worked. And I was really pleased about that. But the next one, this is actually a piece of flash fiction. And this is where my real weird side comes out. This is called Uncle Wesley. I always thought there was something weird about my Uncle Wesley, but couldn't quite put my finger on it. Not that I would want to put a finger on anything to do with him. I may catch his nasty side. But it baffled me that he freaked me out, and I didn't know why. Some people would have been taken aback that he wore a saucepan on his head when he went out, with the handle always pointing southwest. It always amused me that he had to adjust the saucepan if he turned a corner or looked round to see what was behind him. I never really understood the southwest thing. He did try to explain it to me once, but I got lost at the bit about evil spirits in Devon. But the saucepan kind of suited him, and he got used to being told to go boil his head by people who couldn't come up with anything more original. I only realised what it was that was weird about him when he gave me some paint for my 18th birthday and told me to put it on my teeth. All those years, he'd had bright red teeth, and I'd been focusing on his saucepan. He said the paint was a tradition passed down by his father to stand out from the crowd. If he wanted to stand out, I don't understand why he ruined the effect by putting a saucepan on his head, but then logic was never a strong point on his side of the family. His sister once gave someone £100 in real money for £50 worth of Monopoly money because there was a house for sale on Old Kent Road. But enough about my eccentric relatives. You want to know what makes me tick, don't you? Well, I once shoved an old-fashioned alarm clock up my bum, which worked for a while, but it was a bit uncomfortable when I sat down, so I was glad when it stopped. I know you think I'm mad, but is it any wonder with a family like mine? My dad was just as bad. He was an introvert and didn't want to stand out, so he Tipp-Ex'd his teeth. And he was considered the bright one of the family. Alas, his attempt at anonymity resulted in bluebirds mistaking his teeth for the White Cliffs of Dover and dive-bombing his mouth, which wasn't what he wanted. I've gone my own way now and completely cut myself off from the family. I live in a bungalow in Devon, and I can't get it out of my head that Uncle Wesley's saucepan handle is pointing the evil spirits in my direction. I never believed in such mumbo-jumbo, but now I'm feeling the need to have him robbed out. Perhaps he was onto something after all. So yeah, that's that one. So back to poetry of a sort. And obviously, if you've listened to all of this set so far, you can obviously tell I'm a very wise man. You know, I mean, you don't get to my age, you know, I'm in my mid-20s now, and you don't get to my age by not picking up wisdom. If you do, then there's no hope for you, really. And I've picked up lots of wisdom, and, you know, I'm going to share it with you. There are many old proverbs, old adages by which people try to live their lives. Some of them are very wise, of course, but in the end, we find our own way, develop our own ideas, even if they can be a bit weird. Me, I'm a bit of a sage, a modern-day guru, and though ultimately you have to do you, I'm going to share my wisdom with anyone who will listen. If you don't want to know, I'm not that fussed, but believe me, I've got this life shit sussed. So, if it looks good and tastes good, it's probably going to make you fat and fuck your heart up. If you can keep your head when all around are losing theirs, you're probably too stupid to understand what's going on. A bird in the hand will probably shit on your fingers. The only certainties in life are death and taxes. And people telling you that the only certainties in life are death and taxes, when clearly they're talking bullshit. Because, well, sunrise, sunset, and Tories valuing money over life. If you can't stand the heat, it's probably because the chip pan's on fire. The King Charles Spaniel is so called because it has very big ears and is totally unsuitable to be head of state. Just like the real thing. A great philosopher once said, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it use deodorant. But most important of all, if at first you don't succeed, try something else. It will save you a lot of disappointment in the long run. Thank you. So now you know I'm a very wise man, and I put that into effect by reviewing things on Facebook. Not Facebook, Amazon. It's usually things, or nearly always things that I haven't bought off Amazon, but that doesn't matter. It's things that I have, often things that I have bought elsewhere, but not off Amazon. And these are two of my favourites. I've done loads, and every one except one is still on Amazon now as a review, live on the product that I reviewed. One didn't make it because it went against community standards, and I can't understand for the life of me why.
Clive, let me mention just one thing. You know, once upon a time there was a media theorist named Marshall McLuhan who said the medium is the message. And I have to applaud you harnessing Amazon to place these humorous reviews. I think it's just awesome. You have found a whole new medium. You have claimed it as your own. God bless you for it, brother. Let's hear a couple of those.
Right, thank you. Both of these are in my book, by the way, Musical Hamsters and Much Bigger Issues. And the first one is probably my favourite one. This one is still on Amazon now as a review for Lynx 48 Hours Deodorant. Whenever I do a review, I always give it 5 stars and start by sounding serious, so that it doesn't flag up straight away as a fake. I'm still surprised that some of them have made it. So, Lynx 48 Hours Deodorant. I'd always believed deodorant was unnecessary. Water and carbolic soap was the way forward. My dad taught me this, and I always followed his advice. Then someone bought me this product for my birthday. They assured me I didn't smell or anything, but thought I would like the colourful can. I can honestly say that gift has changed my life. At the age of 48, I have finally had my first girlfriend. She collects deodorant cans as a hobby. That is how we met. Anyway, I'm rambling. This stuff really does smell nice, and the happiness it has brought to my life inspired a poem after several months of writer's block. And that poem goes like this. This deodorant is magnificent. I think it is significant that I have saved lots of water and lots of soap, because this product is so dope. Monday morning, just one quick spray, and I don't have to wash for the next 2 days. 48 hours on, repeat the dose, and you can safely get up close. No whiff, no pung, no smelly armpits, but make sure to spray your other bits. It's ecologically good, methinks. Don't waste water, just use Lynx. So that is still on Amazon as a review now. This one isn't, because it went against community standards. I was pushing it as far as I could because I couldn't understand that they were all being accepted. So I was just getting sillier and sillier until they said no. And I thought they were never going to say no. But then I found the weak point. And this is for Carex hand wash. 5 stars. This stuff is amazing. Definitely lives up to the hype, and I will make sure everyone knows that Carex is much better than soap. My hands are sparkling like diamonds, and although they don't taste great, I know my partner can safely lick them, which I find to be a real turn on. And the odds against them catching anything lethal are negligible. Oh, go on. Lick them. Oh, lick them, baby. Oh. Where was I? Oh, yes. I have always been sceptical of claims that these things kill 99% of bacteria, but now I know it's true. As I applied the stuff, they were singing songs of resistance, but it quickly went quiet, but for one lone voice vowing revenge. I will try a different hand wash and some hydrochloric acid to see if I can kill that one. But yeah, if you're willing to gamble that 0.1% won't do you any harm, then oh yeah, lick it, lick. Oh God, gotta go. And yeah, that didn't make the grade. I don't know why. So it went against community standards apparently. And another thing I do along the same sort of lines is I write emails or letters to companies, usually companies, with really ridiculous stuff. And what first inspired me to do this, and this was a long time ago, and I didn't do it myself for a long time, but I don't know whether you're familiar with the books by Ted Alnancy, Letters from a Knot. Yeah, I found those books absolutely hilarious. The first one I ever picked up, I was actually looking for poetry books, and I picked this book up in the bookshop, and I was laughing so loud. I had tears strolling down my face and everything. I'm not claiming in any way that my stuff is as funny as that, but I do enjoy doing this. And this one, I recently saw an advert for bus drivers in Swindon, where I live, obviously. So I emailed them. Needless to say, I didn't get a reply. But I emailed them. My interest is piqued by your advertisement for driving operatives of your really rather splendid vehicles. Sufficiently piqued, in fact, for me to be spurred into submitting this application. I don't drive a car, but if only those pedestrians had not been on that pavement at that time, I would surely have passed my test and avoided the custodial sentence. I know you are an equal opportunities employer, so I am sure the time spent at HM's pleasure will not count against me. I don't know why I even mentioned it. I do ride a bike, and my parents had such faith in my cycling proficiency they allowed me to ride without a helmet. They even encouraged me to do really dangerous stunts with no helmet. Now, I realise stunts will not be encouraged on your buses. To be honest, I'm applying for this job for pin money. I collect safety pins and the price have rocketed. And because I am lonely since I accidentally put my hamster in the washing machine, after not for the first time mistaking it for underwear, I bear the scars. I will be 70 years old in November, but I still have all my teeth and do not get confused. But I would appreciate it if you kept me off the routes that go over the magic roundabout. If I am needed on those routes, I'd be quite happy to do a diversion. I could keep passengers entertained by farting any of 27 national anthems in a traffic jam, though of course with a big bus to barge traffic out of the way, this would rarely be necessary. Please give us a job. So they didn't reply. And another one that I did recently, and again they didn't reply. Again, I can't work out why. Dear Boots the Chemist, at work I am required to wear a hard hat, and a couple of weeks ago it suddenly went floppy. I thought it was a bit strange as it had never happened before, so I just carried on as normal, but to my horror, a few days later it happened again. I started to be laughed at by my workmates, being called Mr. Floppy and Old Droopy, so in desperation I put Viagra on my head to keep under a brand new hat. But sure enough, when it really mattered, I had a floppy hat. I'm not sure what to do. This is obviously not a metaphor for anything, but every time I need it to be hard, it goes floppy. I even tried stimulating the hat in the privacy of my own home, but it didn't work. I am scared I may get a head injury. Can you help? As in, help me to avoid the head injury, obviously, not to inflict it, obviously. Thank you in advance for reading. If you can help me with this, I'll trust you with my itchy anus. And needless to say, I didn't get a reply to that either. So, right, on to the next one. This is really weird. There is definitely a Robert Garnham influence in this, in more ways than one. And it's called, I Can't Tell You How Recently I Wrote This Poem for Reasons That Will Become Obvious. I don't know how to cope with this. It was supposed to be an amusing trick by a professional stage hypnotist. I'd volunteered to be the victim, thinking I could just outwit him. I thought it would be fun to play along, that I was psychologically strong, but I was wrong. Oh, so wrong. He had me properly under his spell. But then he went very dizzy and fell, bumped his head and got knocked out, and I just got forgotten about. I can't snap out of it, and now I'm afflicted with the problem which he inflicted. It was supposed to be fun, but now it's a curse. I cannot think of anything worse than the problem he has left me with. If ever I see the letters H-A-M written in exact succession, I'm compelled to swear. It became an obsession. It's totally involuntary. And the letters N-E-W in succession make me lose my poise and just make a weird, involuntary noise. So, being from Birmingham, fuck it, has become a real problem. I can't go anywhere near Street Station to travel out from Birmingham masturbation. I don't bet on market races, and my rhyme scheme has become very shit bollocks wank fisted. And when I'm in London, I can't ask for directions to the borough of asshole for obvious reasons. I saw tonight on the 6 o'clock that the hypnotist doesn't remember me. There seemingly is no cure. I can't even ask for a shit sandwich without getting laughed at. I had to sell my pet wankster. I'm going to sue, get lots of compensation, and try to start my life at
Bravo, sir. Bravo.
That was influenced. It sort of it started out, as you could tell by the beginning. It started out as just a rhyming poem, but then I'd heard I'd heard Robert do a poem that he called what was it called? I can't remember for the life of me what it was called. A sound poem. He called it a sound poem, and basically it consisted of him just making strange noises for 2 or 3 minutes, and it was hilarious. And I think that's where that one came from. But right, I've got one full length poem more to read, but I've also got a few short poems, very short poems. Now, as I said earlier on, I used to write haiku and tanka, and I found they were very different to what I thought they were. And now I don't do it anymore. I like to write tanka and haiku, which I'm not, but I may have thought they were at one time. And I must admit, I mean, I've got a lot of poets on Facebook who I met through haiku and tanka, and one or two of them thought I was taking the mickey and unfriended me. And I wasn't taking the mickey out of their art form. I'm taking the mickey out of the Western perception of their art form. So, a couple of haiku, well, 3 haiku, no, there's more than that, 4 haiku to start with. So they're 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and 5 syllables. And they're not really haiku at all, but if you're bright and write very high IQ haiku, I like you, I do. So that's the first one. Then the next one is, my mum used to say, masturbating sends you blind. Can't see it myself. Then they say I'm stupid, that I'm 1 syllable short of a high cuckoo. And the last haiku, this is probably not as relevant now as when I wrote it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Meghan and Harry, a well-attended wedding, but look, no fathers. And that's obviously playing on the fact that a lot of people believe that our now king is not Harry's father, but that's another matter. Right, tanker 57577. This little tanker has the Clive Oseman trademark stamped all over it. Unfortunately, this means I can't see the fucking thing. And I'm going to stop counting the syllables on my fingers now because I've got pins and needles. But I can assure you they are 57577. And the next one. I have often claimed many of John Lennon's songs were stolen from me. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And then, of course, there's the limericks. Now, we all know what a limerick is. There once was a ginger-haired man who couldn't get the hang of poetry, so he went on a course to learn how to rhyme. What a waste of money that was. And the last one, this was actually part of a much longer thing when I was doing the Queen impersonation thing, and this is not the Queen, but and this was based on a little sketch I did where the Queen was at a spoken word event in York. I mean, it's a long story, but and Simon Armitage, our poet laureate, who's from Yorkshire, not York itself, but he's from Yorkshire. He's a very, very good poet, by the way, one of my early favourites. But I pretended that when he was first appointed poet laureate, he was so shocked that for a while it sent him into writer's block and he couldn't write anything. So he started writing limericks just to sort of get it out of the system. And he went to an open mic. And I always say, people don't believe this is true, but I was there, I saw it with my own eyes. It's definitely true. And it obviously done in a Yorkshire accent, or the best Yorkshire accent I can do, because this is Simon Armitage. There once were a boy born in York who grew up with a sword made of pork. It stood up by its head, so he panicked and then tried to puncture it with a fork. And finally, in the short poems, a Cleryhue. Now, I love Cleryhue. I only discovered them fairly recently. And for those who don't know, the only real rules are the first line is just the name of the subject, the name of the person that it's writing about. The rhyme scheme is A, A, B, B, and basically anything else goes. It doesn't scan, and it's just all over the place. So this is one of our most revered politicians, who very unfortunately recently lost his seat in the election, which was such a shame. Jacob Rees-Mogg got flushed down the bog, which is actually a fate that is fit for all pieces of shit. So that's the short ones out of the way, and I'm going to finish with what I can definitely call my signature poem. I close nearly all my sets with this poem, and people have heard it many, many times, and they still enjoy it, they still laugh, and it is without doubt the most successful poem I've ever written. I mean, I don't do many slams now, but this poem got me my highest ever score in a slam. Funnily enough, in York, where the 5 judges, 3 of them marked me 10 out of 10, and the other 2 gave me 9.5. And that is the highest score I've ever got in a slam. And the reaction to the poem was brilliant. I've actually got a recording of it, and it still lives with me to this day. And I sometimes play it to cheer myself up if I'm having a little bit of a downer. And this comes from the time when, the introduction to this is that I live on my own in a flat, and obviously I go out to work, and you go to spoken word events and various other things. But I always make sure when I go out that the doors are locked, the windows are locked, nobody can get in, and there's never been any sign of a break-in. But somebody managed to swap the letters around on my keyboard on my computer, and they put the F where the P should be and the P where the F should be, and I didn't notice. And I wrote a poem that I was going to do at an open mic, and I turned up. I hadn't practiced it because I've been busy, and on the train on the way to the event I started reading it. I was thinking, oh my god, what have I done? But I had to stick with it because I as I said earlier, I read. I don't perform from memory because my memory is absolutely shot to pieces. So I hadn't got anything else prepared, so I had to read this poem, and it's called When F and P Change Places. This poem, if that's what it is about nothing in particular, just various bits and feces. I don't like to start with politics, a peeled pull of fistfots and fanatics who couldn't organise a fiss-off in a brewery, and in the case of UK immigration policy, responsible for plenty of fatalities, though I'm sure they will be reported favourably by Fox News and its British equivalent GB News with Nigel Farage and his friends. So let's be more pliffant and talk about sports feeful like Feet Samfras, famous feeful prom the fast like Napoleon Bonaparte, or even contemporary feeful like the unfortunately not yet dearly departed Piers Morgan, or Katie Hopkins, who always seems like she's paused the pineapple off her bum. No? Okay, let's talk music. You may have an eclectic taste, ranging from the Pooh Fighters through offerers like the Magic Flute, old British hits like XTC's Making Flans, poor Nigel, I'd poison them, wartime classics like Fack Off Your Troubles, Beatles classics like I Peel Pine, festive songs like A Partridge in a Pear Tree, or even some frog rock. I wish I was musical. I'd go on tour entertaining the peafang public in places like Finland, Portugal, France, and probably Newfoundland. But enough of that. Let's talk food. I'm not sure what to eat today, roast fork and applesauce, or fish and chips. And if fish and chips, do I have pickled onions or mushy fees? Or do I just have a fucker steak and kidney pie? I'm not saying I eat too much food that's unhealthy and pattening, but my clothes are size trifle XL. Fita five for ficta feck up pickled feathers. What? Plagiarism? Puck up, or I'll funch your lights out. Oh, appended are we? I fray you then call the felice, the coffers, the pilth, the figs. Puck the felice! Oh, come on. I was joking. I wouldn't really funch you. I don't approve of fisticuffs or violence of any kind. I'm a facipist. My house has patio doors. It's a big house. It's rather palatial, with a games room, perfool and fing-fong. OK, I'm taking the fiss. I live in a folky little plat, or apartment if you prefer, among the pheasants, and I'm probably stuck there until the Grim Reaper comes calling. Whatever a reefer is, I mean, I wouldn't go. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Clive. Just wonderful. Top notch as always.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Please tell us the name of your book one more time and where people can get it.
Okay, so it's called Musical Hamsters and Much Bigger Issues. And it's published by Alien Buddha Press, which is American based. And people, at the moment, the only way to get it, and I know it's unfortunate for some people because they don't like Amazon for good reason. But at the moment, people in Britain, in the UK, they can get it from me personally, either through the post or personally. But the only other way of getting it at the moment is through Amazon.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Clive. We really enjoyed it. And just keep up the good work, my friend. Wonderful work.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do as well. You know, it's always a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, buddy. You have a good day. Thanks again.
And you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Poets of the East with Clive Oseman. Thanks again, brother. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.